Senator Jack Reed presses Pete Hegseth on a series of explosive issues that cut to the core of military professionalism and constitutional duty. From threatening emails sent to active duty officers, to attacks on diversity policies, to pardons for convicted war criminals, Reed questions whether Hegseth's rhetoric and actions risk turning the U.S. military into a political instrument. The exchange exposes a deep divide over accountability, discipline, and whether loyalty to ideology is being placed above the rule of law.
Written in its quote, "Oh yeah, and fire any general who hasn't carried water for Obama and Biden's extra constitution and agenda-driven transformation for our military. Clean house and start over." It's come to my attention that current serving military personnel have received emails threatening them with being fired for supporting the current DoD policies. One mail that was sent to a military officer with the subject line, "Clean house," reminiscent of your specific comment, states, and I quote, "With the incoming administration looking to remove disloyal, corrupt, traitorous, liberal officers such as yourself, we will certainly be putting your name into the list of those personnel to be removed. We know you support the woke DEI policies and will ensure you never again influence anyone in the future. You and the redacted spouse's name will be lucky if you're able to collect your military requirement," end quote. Now, I want to remind everyone that these policies that are being referred to date back decades, to the 1940s and 50s, with respect to racial discrimination particularly, and administrations of both parties, including the Trump administration and their first party, caused those policies to be enforced. Mr. Hegseth, are you aware of these emails being sent to officers?
Senator, you mentioned the word accountability, which is something we have not had for the last 4 years.
Are you aware of these messages being sent to officers?
Certainly I'm not aware of that. It's not one of my efforts, but there's been no accountability for the disaster of the withdrawal in Afghanistan. And that's precisely why we're here today.
Excuse me.
Is that leadership has been unwilling to take accountability. It's the time to restore that to our most senior ranks.
You've written publicly that DI policy is a distraction and have military personnel walking on eggshells. Do you believe that emails like that are essentially threatening both a serving officer and a spouse and claiming that they'll lose their pension will have a distraction and detract from the lethality?
Senator, you mentioned the 40s and 50s, and you're precisely right. The military was a forerunner in courageous racial integration in ways no other institutions were willing to do. I served with men and women of all backgrounds because of the courage of people decades and decades ago. Incredibly important. However, the DEI policies of today are not the same as what happened back then. They're dividing troops inside formations, causing commanders to walk on eggshells, not putting meritocracy first. That's the indictment that's made by those serving right now.
Excuse me.
And why we're having this conversation.
All of your public comments don't talk about meritocracy. They talk about liberal democratic efforts that are destroying the military, that those people are our enemies. That's not meritocracy. That's a political view. And your goal, as I see emerging, is to politicize the military in favor of your particular positions, which you've outlined extensively, which would be the worst blow to the professionalism of the United States military and would undercut readiness, undercut retention, because I can see officers receiving these emails beginning to wonder very seriously if they should continue. Let me change subject for a moment here. You've been instrumental in securing pardons for several convicted war criminals. In at least 2 of these cases, the military personnel who served in combat with these convicted service members were not supportive of the pardons. They did their duty as soldiers to report war crimes. Your definition of lethality seems to embrace those people who do commit war crimes, rather than those who stand up and say, this is not right. So what's the response to your service members who personally witnessed these and took courageously reported them to their superiors.
Senator, as someone who's led men in combat directly and had to make very difficult decisions, I've thought very deeply about the balance between legality and lethality, ensuring that the men and women on the front lines have the opportunity to destroy with and close the enemy, and that lawyers aren't the ones getting in the way. I'm not talking about disavowing the laws of war or the Geneva Conventions or the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Sir, I'm talking about restrictive rules of engagement that these men and women behind me understand they've lived with on the battlefield, which has made it more difficult to defeat our enemies. In many of the cases you're talking about in particular, sir, there was evidence withheld, there was prosecutorial misconduct, and as someone who looks case by case and defaults to the warfighter, to the men and women with dust on their boots, not the second guessers in air-conditioned offices in Washington, D.C.
Excuse me.
I look case by case and was proud to work with President Trump to understand those cases and ensure that our warriors are always looked out for.
Those cases were adjudicated by who? People in Washington or fellow non-commissioned officers who had also served, sacrificed, and believed in the ethic of the military? Who were the court-martial?
Senator, in multiple cases, they were actually acquitted, but
some
charges
cases,
lingered.
yes,
regardless of where those convening authorities were, yes, sir.
Some were, but others were convicted, and you asked for pardon. That's the only reason you asked for pardon, because they were convicted. But the other factor, too, is you've already disparaged in writing the Geneva Convention, the rules of law, all of these things. How will you be able to effectively lead a military in which one of the principal elements is discipline, respect for lawful authority? You have made statements to your platoon after being briefed by a JAG officer. Well, by the way, would you explain what a JAG-off is?
I don't think I need to, sir.
Why not?
Because the men and women watching understand.
Well, perhaps some of my colleagues don't understand.
It would be a JAG officer who puts his or her own priorities in front of the warfighters. Their promotions, their medals, in front of having the backs of those who are making the tough calls on the front lines.
The exchange between Senator Jack Reed and Pete Hegseth raises one of the most consequential questions facing the United States military today. Whether an institution built on discipline, lawful authority, and nonpartisanship can withstand increasing political pressure from within and outside its ranks. Reed's questioning is rooted in real-world consequences, not abstract theory. Threatening emails sent to active duty officers, using language strikingly similar to Hegseth's public remarks, signal a breakdown in trust that strikes at the heart of military professionalism. When service members fear retaliation for perceived political views rather than misconduct, the chain of command itself is put at risk. Reed emphasizes that the policies now being attacked as ideological are not modern inventions, but long-standing principles that date back decades. Racial integration, equal opportunity, and non-discrimination were adopted to strengthen cohesion and readiness, not weaken them. By framing these policies as disloyal or dangerous, Reed warns that the military risks redefining service not by merit or mission, but by ideological conformity. That shift threatens unity, morale, and confidence across the force. Hegseth's defense centers on accountability, lethality, and protecting warfighters from bureaucratic interference. Yet Reed exposes a central contradiction. Accountability cannot exist if it is selectively applied. Pardoning convicted war criminals while disparaging those who reported violations sends a powerful and deeply troubling message. Courage in uniform is not limited to combat. It also includes upholding the law, respecting the Geneva Conventions, and reporting wrongdoing even when it carries personal or professional risk. The consequences Reed highlights are immediate and tangible. A politicized military struggles with retention, morale, and readiness. Officers receiving threats against their careers and pensions may reconsider continued service. Commanders may hesitate to act independently. Younger service members may learn that loyalty to ideology matters more than integrity, judgment, or lawful conduct. Over time, this environment corrodes the cohesion and trust required for national defense. At its core, this confrontation is about allegiance. Reed makes clear that the U.S. military serves the Constitution, not a political movement or individual worldview. Discipline, lawful authority, and neutrality are not obstacles to strength. They are its foundation. When those principles are weakened, restoring them becomes far more difficult and far more costly. This moment serves as a warning. Accountability without law becomes retribution. Lethality without discipline becomes recklessness. Loyalty without constitutional grounding becomes factionalism. Reed's challenge underscores a fundamental truth. The greatest threat to the military is not oversight or diversity, but the normalization of political intimidation inside an institution meant to stand above politics. The future strength of the armed forces depends on whether leaders choose professionalism, restraint, and constitutional duty over ideology, fear, and coercion. Reed's questions also reflect concern for civilian oversight, a cornerstone of democratic control of the armed forces. When rhetoric encourages service members to view elected leaders, judges, or legal advisors as enemies, it fractures the balance between military authority and civilian governance. History shows that once this line is blurred, restoring it is extraordinarily difficult. The professionalism of the U.S. military has long rested on the understanding that obedience to lawful orders and respect for civilian leadership are non-negotiable. By pressing these issues publicly, Reed reinforces that safeguarding the military is not about weakening it, but about preserving the values that have made it effective for generations. His exchange serves as a reminder that readiness is not measured solely by firepower, but by trust, discipline, and adherence to law. Without those pillars, no amount of force can compensate.